The Pro Football Hall of Fame is located in Canton, Ohio. It is a building filled with bronze busts, gold jackets, and the names of the greatest football players who ever lived. Every summer, a new class walks through those doors and takes their place among the legends of the game. And every single year, there is a room somewhere in that building where 50 voters sit around a table and decide who gets in and who does not. 50 media members, one vote, one direction, up or down. For 13 years, Steve Wisniewski was one of the most dominant offensive linemen on the planet. 8 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pro selections, 6 second-team All-Pro selections, the NFL 1990s All-Decade Team, 206 starts in 208 possible games. He is the man John Gruden called one of the nicest human beings he had ever been around and one of the most ferocious competitors he had ever coached. He is the man that Mark Schlereth, a Super Bowl champion and one of the most respected guards of that era, studied on film every single time he needed to learn how to handle a great defensive tackle. The other guard he studied alongside Wisniewski was Bruce Matthews. Bruce Matthews is in the Hall of Fame. Steve Wisniewski is not. And after 20 years of eligibility on the modern era ballot, his window has now closed. The door did not slam, nobody made a dramatic announcement. It just quietly shut. And that quiet is the most painful part of this entire story.
Let us go back to where this man actually came from, because that background matters more than most people realize. Rutland, Vermont, 1967. Steve Wisniewski is born as the youngest of 6 children into a tight-knit Polish-American family. His father was a man of hard work and high expectations. His older brother Leo played football at Penn State and later spent 3 seasons as a defensive lineman with the Baltimore Colts. Football was in the family. But the road to football for Steve Wisniewski was not smooth. It was not clean. It was not comfortable. When he was just 3 years old, he was involved in a severe car accident that left him with permanent nerve damage. Permanent. That means every single day of his life, from that moment forward, he carried physical damage caused by something that happened before he was even old enough to remember it. And then, layered on top of that, he battled dyslexia throughout his childhood. He sat in special education classes while other kids moved ahead. He struggled to read at the level of his classmates. The world, in those early years, was giving Steve Wisniewski every possible reason to believe that greatness was not meant for him. But his special education teacher rewarded him with candy for good behavior at the end of every week. He loved those classes. He worked in them. And eventually, by the time he reached middle school, he had caught up to every other student in his grade. He later said he credits those classes with giving him both his love of reading and his love of sweets. That detail tells you everything about how this man processed difficulty. He did not run from it. He found something to love inside it and used it to push forward. His family moved to Houston, Texas when he was 10 years old. He attended Westfield High School, developed his body, refined his game, and by the time he was ready for college, Penn State came calling. His brother Leo had walked those same halls. Joe Paterno, one of the greatest coaches in college football history, was building something special in Happy Valley. Wisniewski walked into that program and became one of its finest products. He was a 2-time first-team All-American. He was one of only 2 offensive linemen in Penn State history to ever be named the team's most valuable player. And in 1986, he was part of an undefeated Penn State team that walked into the Fiesta Bowl and defeated the top-ranked Miami Hurricanes 14-10 to claim the national championship. Steve Wisniewski was a college football champion. Most players never reach that level. He did it before he was old enough to legally have a drink. Then came the 1989 NFL Draft. He described the day himself. He came home from a quiet morning at church. He wanted calm. He wanted to sit with his fiancée and watch it unfold peacefully. Instead, his Penn State teammates showed up. Then more people showed up, and then more. By the time the draft began, 150 people packed into his 1-bedroom apartment, spilling out into the quad. He could barely see the television. He could barely hear anything. The first round came and went with no call. Nothing.
Then a commercial ended, and there it was, scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Second round, first pick. Penn State guard Steve Wisniewski. Dallas Cowboys. The room detonated. He was from Houston. He was going home to Texas. He was going to play in front of his family. Everyone was screaming and celebrating. And then the phone rang. He picked it up. He could barely hear the person on the other end because of the noise. Someone was mumbling something about the Los Angeles Raiders. In the same draft, before the celebration had even finished, the Cowboys had traded his rights to the Raiders in exchange for a package of picks that included running back Daryl Johnston. Just like that, he was a Raider. He would always be a Raider. Every one of his 13 professional seasons, every single one, was played in silver and black. When he arrived at training camp with the Raiders, they placed him on the scout team and put him across from Howie Long. If you do not understand what that means, let us be very clear. Howie Long was a Pro Bowl defensive end, a former Golden Gloves boxer, one of the most feared pass rushers in the history of the league. Other veterans did not want to face Howie Long in practice, and the Raiders handed this assignment to a rookie.
Wisniewski said it himself. He went home and cried himself to sleep at night after those practice sessions. He was exhausted in ways he had never experienced. He felt like he was losing every single rep. He felt like he was not good enough. But here is the critical thing. He never backed down, not once. He went right back out there the next morning and tried again. And he earned Howie Long's respect immediately, because Long recognized that this young man was simply not going to be intimidated by anyone. After his second year in the league, having practiced every single day against one of the best defensive players in football, Wisniewski was voted to his first Pro Bowl. He said he knew it happened purely because no defensive player he would face on a Sunday could match what he had already endured on a Wednesday in practice. That is how competitors are built. Not by playing the easy games, by surviving the hard ones first. Before every game, he sat by his locker, closed his eyes, and visualized his blocks. Every assignment, every technique, every defensive end he was going to face. While other players prepared in their own ways, Wisniewski was already playing the game in his mind before the whistle blew. That mental discipline was not an accident. It was a system, and it worked for 13 years.
In those 13 seasons, the Raiders averaged 9 wins per year. They went to the postseason 5 times. Their best seasons came in 1990 and 2000, when they won 12 games each year and advanced to the AFC Championship game both times. Wisniewski was there for all of it. He blocked for Marcus Allen. He blocked for Bo Jackson. He blocked for Eric Dickerson, Roger Craig, Napoleon Kaufman, Tyrone Wheatley, and Charlie Garner, running backs who all rank among the greatest the Raiders franchise has ever produced. He said that Bo Jackson was the best athlete he had ever been around in his entire life, a man who was an all-star in baseball and a Pro Bowler in football simultaneously. A man of such extraordinary physical power that when Bo went down with the hip injury that ended his career, the entire Raiders locker room simply assumed he would be back because no one could believe that body was capable of being permanently damaged. And for 6 consecutive years, from 1990 through 1995, Steve Wisniewski was selected to the Pro Bowl. 6 straight years. Then again in 1997, then again in 2000. 8 total. At the time of his retirement, that tied him with Art Shell, Howie Long, and Tim Brown for the most Pro Bowl selections in Raiders history.
One of the most telling testimonials about just how good Wisniewski actually was came from the people who competed against him and alongside him at the highest level. Mark Schlereth, who won Super Bowl rings with the Washington Redskins and the Denver Broncos and earned 3 Pro Bowl selections of his own, revealed that whenever he had to prepare for a tough defensive tackle matchup, there were only 2 guards whose film he would pull, Bruce Matthews and Steve Wisniewski. Not the guard who had faced that specific player most recently, not the guard with the most statistical data available. The 2 men Schlereth considered the absolute standard of excellence at the position. One of those men is in Canton. The other is still waiting. John Gruden wrote about Wisniewski directly. He said he had heard all the stories before he arrived in Oakland, that Wisniewski was great, but tough and mean and ornery. And when he got there, he confirmed every word of the football description and found the exact opposite of what he expected as a human being. He described Wisniewski as one of the nicest people he had ever been around in his life. Extremely powerful, gifted with remarkable footwork for a man of his size, and incredible aptitude for football. Athletic, smart, tough as nails, never injured, first in line for every drill, never making excuses. And when he did speak, Gruden said, what he said carried weight.
There is also the other side of the story, the complicated side. Wisniewski developed a reputation as one of the dirtiest players in the league. In 1995 alone, he accumulated $65,000 in fines and received a personal warning letter from then NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue. ESPN once ranked him the fourth dirtiest player in any team sport, placing him just behind Dennis Rodman. He was put on lists, he was labeled, and he rejected that label completely. He responded to Sports Illustrated by pointing out that he was clean-cut, had no tattoos, no jewelry, did not drink or use drugs, was deeply involved in his church, coached youth soccer, and made his family his primary priority. He said not a single player he had ever blocked had been carted off the field with a serious injury. The people who lined up against him and studied his game carefully, the Ron Lynn's and Mark Schlereths of the world, backed that up consistently. He was not dirty, he was ferociously competitive, and he refused to be beaten. Those fines and that reputation may very well be part of the reason 50 voters in a room have hesitated. That and the simple, brutal reality that offensive linemen have always been undervalued in the Hall of Fame process. The voters are media members. Media covers quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs. They write about touchdowns. They create highlight reels. The man who cleared the path for that touchdown, who held his assignment for 4 full seconds under pressure so the quarterback could find his receiver, that man exists largely in the background of someone else's story. And when those same media members walk into a voting room and rank their priorities, invisible excellence competes at a disadvantage against visible greatness.
Here is the architecture of the voting system and why the margin matters so profoundly. The selection committee has 50 members. From the list of 15 modern-era finalists, they vote multiple rounds, cutting from 15 to 10, then 10 to 7. From those final 7 names, a player must receive at least 80% approval to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. 80% of 50 voters is 40 votes. 40 people in that room need to raise their hand and say yes. And based on everything that has been reported, everything that has been discussed in the researcher communities and the media circles that follow this process closely, Steve Wisniewski has come extraordinarily close to that number. Close enough that a single changed vote would have placed him in Canton. 1 vote. That is the exact width of the gap between this man and football immortality. Now the modern era window has permanently closed. He has moved to the senior committee process, where the path is longer and the pace is slower. Fellow Raiders legends Jim Plunkett and Lester Hayes have been in that same process for years without receiving the call. The senior committee can elect a maximum of 3 players per year, and those players who have waited longest in the queue naturally receive priority consideration. Wisniewski is new to this process. The math is not encouraging. But the case is not weaker. If anything, time has only made it more obvious. He was named one of only 4 offensive players on the NFL 1990s All-Decade team who have not yet received induction. The other 3 offensive players on that team who are already enshrined make his continued exclusion look less like an oversight and more like an institutional failure of recognition.
The number 12 tells another story worth understanding. In his entire 13-year career, Wisniewski was called for holding only 12 times. 12 times. For a guard whose job is to engage with elite pass rushers on every single passing down of every single game across an entire decade and beyond, 12 holding penalties is not just good, it is extraordinary. It is the number of a technician, a craftsman, a man who understood the rules of engagement at his position so deeply that he could dominate without crossing lines. That is not the record of a dirty player. That is the record of a master. After retirement, he returned to the Raiders as an assistant offensive line coach. He coached at Stanford, where he helped lead their offensive line to an Orange Bowl appearance. He became a Raiders ambassador. He lit the ceremonial torch at a Raiders game in London as a tribute to the late Al Davis, the man who built the franchise that defined Wisniewski's career. In 2025, he stood on the stage at the NFL Draft in Green Bay to announce the Raiders' Day 2 selections, still representing the silver and black with the same quiet pride he carried through every single one of those 206 starts. His nephew, Stephen Wisniewski, followed him into the NFL as an offensive lineman, honoring the family name across multiple franchises. Football did not stop at Steve. It continued through him into the next generation, because that is the kind of legacy a man builds when he truly gives everything he has to his craft.
Steve Wisniewski was born into difficulty, permanent nerve damage at 3 years old, dyslexia, special education classes, and he converted every single one of those obstacles into fuel. He earned a national championship at Penn State. He earned 8 Pro Bowls with the Raiders. He earned the respect of every coach, every teammate, and every opponent who ever had to prepare for him. He earned his place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame by every legitimate measure the sport has ever used to define greatness at his position. The only thing he has not earned is the vote he needed, the one single vote that would have changed everything. He is a Raider for life. He said it himself. And that is exactly the problem with this story, because Raiders for life deserve better than a closed door and a long wait in a room where the line moves slowly and the years keep passing. Steve Wisniewski belongs in Canton. Not someday, not eventually. He belongs there now. And the fact that he is not, that one vote in a room of 50 people is all that separated him from his rightful place among the legends of this game, is one of the most undeniable injustices in the modern history of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.